One. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first episode of Z.I.P Talks during this 2023-2024 season. We are so excited to be back after the World Championship, and our first guest of this season is no other than Mr. J. Flores. So we'll start off by letting him introduce himself, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's cool to be part of the first episode back. I can't wait for all the things that are coming for your team and others, especially as we get closer to kind of the season launching. But my name is Jay Flores. I used to work for Rockwell Automation. I was their global STEM ambassador after a couple years of engineering for them. And that role really got me very close to first. I got to do really cool things from a sponsor perspective. And Rockwell's a very unique company in that their products go into creating the experience, more so on the FRC side, but their products actually make the game work, and teams can use the products on their robots as well. So I got to be part of kind of those decisions as to when first would come to us with a challenge for the season. How do we score a small ball versus a large ball, or a ball that might have holes in it? Being able to sense all those things in real time was a really cool part of my job. And then towards the end of the pandemic, I decided to go off on my own. During the pandemic, a lot of the roles and the things that I could do with Rockwell and First weren't a thing anymore. I was actually right before the US shut down. I was in Brazil and Mexico at their national championships for FLL and FTC and FRC in Mexico. And it was just like high fives and, the energy of a normal first event. And then I came back home and they're like, no, you can't do any of that anymore. So I was really sad about that. But then I started thinking, like, how could I do more stuff on social media? How could I do more like online at home experiments? And that ended, this thing that was very sad at first ended up in me creating my own brands and eventually being able to launch my own business. So I started It's Not Magic, It's Science, which is my at-home science kind of experiment brand. That started as at home, and now I actually do out in the community. I do it at museums, at schools, and different events where I can get sponsorship for. So it's been an absolute blast going from being really involved globally with First to then having to switch it up, but still try to stay close to the community and do more science things. And then now being able to do both, being back at First events and also doing science experiments and other fun stuff like that. So, and now I'm here with you guys, being able to talk about outreach and being an ambassador for First.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know for our team at least, we've been able to build our brand over the past years, and with that, we've been able to make First loud and, what that program can do with us at least. So I know you talked briefly about It's Not Magic, It's Science. Could you tell us a little bit about like what you do in it?
Yeah. So, I was coming from this like high energy FLL, FTC, FRC tournaments. And I'm like, man, kids aren't going to have this experience anymore. And I know sometimes when I was growing up, at least, I liked math and science because I knew it was like challenging and it could do cool things with it. But this classroom experience, depending on, who I was with and what types of things we were studying, wasn't always as engaging as just like being hands-on and experimenting with stuff, right? Like as a child, I was very like curious and I would mess around with things. And I had parents that were very supportive of that. So I kind of had this kind of need for curiosity and hands-on experiences. So I knew kids weren't going to have that as much through like Zoom. And so I started thinking like, what are some creative ways in which I can have high-level kind of science entertainment, but also very educational, and at the same time, low cost and things that you have at home. Things you have at home, because most of us were going to be cooped up. We weren't going to be able to go into museums or having engineers visit your school and stuff, but also low cost because I knew people would be struggling during that time. And in general, I try to design with equity in mind from the beginning so that anybody can get engaged. And we're not trying to figure out later, how do we get other communities engaged? If we design with equity from the beginning, we can reach more people overall. So I started looking around, baking soda, vinegar, like different things that were in the kitchen that you could do really cool things with. And I think the magic, well, I'm sorry for the pun, but the magic of it was the presentation of how I did it. It was like not just doing a random mix of vinegar and baking soda and watch it fizz. Like, how do we turn this into something that looks like a magic trick? So one of my favorite experiments and one of the early ones I did was called the invisible firefighter. Basically what happens is when you mix vinegar and baking soda, it creates carbon dioxide gas. Carbon dioxide gas can blow out a candle. So I have the candle on the table and I have a mug in which kind of off screen I poured a little bit of vinegar into, there's already baking soda in it. And I come on screen and I just tilt it over. Nothing comes out except for, CO2, which you can't see. And the candle magically flows away. Right. So something that is a very simple experiment that anyone knows could create kind of a gas, but in the way that we presented it can blow someone's mind. And it also helped me in the sense of reaching kids and parents that weren't already looking for science, right? I wanted to reach the kids that had never heard about FIRST, the kids that had never done an experiment kit in their home, and that weren't necessarily looking for science. They're just scrolling through TikTok. And then all of a sudden they see this really cool thing. And since I'm a scientist and not a magician, I can tell you how it works. So I hook them with the trick, and then that gets them excited to then want to listen on to the science of how it works. And then I encourage kids to explore and would you apply this to real life scenarios? So that's really I just got as many of those experiments as I could. And that started blowing up on TikTok. I started spreading it across social media, got millions of views there. And then once the kind of pandemic ended and we could get out in person and stuff, I created a kit so that kids could actually have the materials that they need, because I wanted to make sure that they weren't just watching me do it, but they were also engaging in the science themselves. They could see, hey, if Jay can do this in my kitchen, I can do it in my kitchen too. But the kit helps with some of the materials that might be a little bit harder to find in your house, but are still low cost. And now I do it as what we call a live tour. So I have different stops in different cities based on the sponsors that I'm working with. Like I was in Detroit with Ford and Milwaukee with Rockwell Automation. Later this month, we'll have a couple more stops in different cities across the country. Later this year. And so now it's just evolved from just a couple TikTok videos to a kit to an actual live show. Hopefully someday I'll be able to make it a TV show of some sort. So I'm continuing to evolve and expand on that.
No, yeah, that sounds really amazing. I know with us at least, at outreach events and other events that we go to, the main thing that we want the kids to be involved with at least is just be wowed by what they're looking at, right? Like I know at least when we're driving the robot around, kids are just amazed by 2 feet of linear slide just going up and dropping a cone onto a pole. Like they're, whoa, that's so cool. Let me drive the robot now, right?
Yeah.
Like they're just fighting over that controller.
And it's awesome for them to see someone that's not that much older than them potentially doing these kind of things. So you guys going out there and giving back while you're still going through the process of learning and growing is incredible, because then they can see themselves. If they could do that in a couple of years, maybe I could do that. Or maybe, like you said, you put the controller in their hands. Actually, maybe I can do it now. So I applaud you guys for doing that type of outreach and really letting kids get engaged and involved with it.
Actually, something that's really cool that kind of reminded me of what you were talking about with your kit is our team actually founded Gateway to Science, a club at our school. And what we do, we're a community-based team, but a club at the school that most of our team goes to. And what we did is it's a club called Gateway to Science, and we pulled a bunch of students who ever wanted to join the club at Seminole High School. And the concept is that we go to different schools and different after school programs at elementary, pre-K, and some middle schools. And we have kids be split up into groups, and they take what may seem like a complicated science problem, science thing, and they make it into a fun experiment. Whether that's pennies and vinegar, or lime, a lemon and sugar and food dye and water and baking soda, or elephant toothpaste. And
yes,
we're able to go to these schools, and then we're showing them about STEM, and then we'll bring the robot in too. And it's really crazy how they're oh, and then they're oh, I never knew that's related to this, and oh, that's a robot, I've never seen one before. And I think that's really cool how we've been able to spread STEM in that way and FIRST.
100%, especially starting so early. I feel a lot of corporations and nonprofits, sometimes they wait until high school or college even. But these kids are naturally curious, and if you continue to show them fun ways to get involved and explore and experiment, where sometimes, like I mentioned, my parents were very great with me in the sense that they let me try and mess around and get things dirty, but not all kids get to do that. So if you get to give them that fun experience of mixing things and changing the colors, and that's something that they might not always get to do, and that could be a game-changing experience for them as they grow older and they think about what is possible for them. So I applaud you again on on that as well, and I think it's extremely important to start young.
I know, yeah, like as I was saying, and as you are saying, it's really important to start young. So one of the outreach events that we have been going to is called Otronicon. That's at our local science center, Orlando Science Center, and there, we're able to not just kids, but also older generations that might not had the chance to experience it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So something that we try and pride ourselves in is that we're able to spread this knowledge gap within multiple generations, not just through the robot, through science experiments or just tinkering with Legos, right? We bring
Yes.
we were an FLL team in the past, so we bring Lego boxes that we have and let kids build anything they want, right? It just we always get comments from parents at these events like what you guys are doing is truly amazing, right? And kids they just want to continue this into the summer and continue on into FLL, which is a really good thing for the growth of the first program and the growth of that child's mind.
So, question for you guys, and you hinted at it that it is extremely rewarding to hear those kinds of things from the students and the parents. So, in the spirit of more than robots, is this part like just as exciting for you all as robot competition? I know they're very different, and I'm sure you love them both for different reasons. But for teams that aren't doing as much outreach or are newer to FIRST and haven't had the time to build that, kind of what experience does that give you guys? How does it make you feel?
Oh yeah, like it feels really good, especially because I'm one of the drivers on our team. So I'm usually at all these outreach events showing people how to drive these robots, and just how you say, like with the little kids, it's great showing them how to do this. And I would also like to add, even adults, like we've been to several
Yeah.
different programs with our sponsors actually, and seeing like even their eyes light up when they get to drive something like this, similar to how the kids are super mind blown about what like the robots can do. It's super cool because I know I was just like one of these kids who would have been mind blown by something, a robot extending like 4 feet across the ground. So it's super rewarding seeing that.
That's cool, and I love that you also mentioned you guys are sharing this with sponsors too, because sometimes they might know the program, they kind of know what they're investing in, but that's different than getting your hands on a robot and seeing how fun that can be for a student and how rewarding and really how much you all learn and grow. Like I'm always mind blown by every program, but I specifically think of like 10-year-old FLL students and like how much they know at that young of an age is absolutely incredible. So the more sponsors that you can show that experience to, and the more you tell your story, that's another form of outreach that's going to lead to more investment, potentially in your team, but across the board in FIRST programs.
Yeah, I would just like to like maybe switch things up a little bit. And recently, our team was able to go to Washington D.C. with a program called SASA, the Student Association for STEM Advocacy. And through this program, we were actually able to meet with several of our Florida legislators. So we were able to meet with the senators and the House of Reps, like the offices for the districts that we are part of. And we were actually able to discuss certain federal programs and federal bills that could increase, that could be increase in funding for STEM advocacy, STEM programs all around the country, especially all around our state. And what we were trying to do is focus on STEM programs in rural and really urban cities. And I was wondering if like maybe your team or you would eventually be able to like spread your scope into different types of advocacy, especially in like the local or the state, especially at the national level, because I know the following that you have is super wide reaching. And I know we were able to meet with our legislature, so seeing someone of such high influence being able to do that would be super cool.
Yeah, I guess I got to go with you guys to DC next time. But yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to one of my favorite quotes of all time, but specifically from Dr. Woody Flowers, which is society gets the best of what it celebrates. And if we're not celebrating STEM, if we're not funding programs like FIRST at the level in which they really truly deserve to be funded, then we're not going to get the best out of our community in that, right? The more we celebrate this, not versus other things, but I'd say like at the level of other things. Like imagine if we celebrated FIRST at the level we celebrated the NBA or the NFL. Like we would be in Iron Man suits. We'd have flying cars. We'd be able to go into space just like on a Tuesday, just because like there would be so much innovation and creativity and problem solved if we sponsored it at that level, and we supported it at that level. And a big part of that comes from influencing leadership and encouraging them to invest in those spaces. Specifically with FIRST, one of the things I love sharing with potential funders or government support is that we don't know what the jobs of the future are going to look like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And FIRST is wonderful at preparing you for a new challenge every single season. This year you're placing a cone. Next year you might be doing something totally different. And some of those skills stay, right? Some of your programming, some of your driving skills, some of those teamwork and core values are still there. But you're taking on a completely new task every year. And the more students that are able to just kind of be ready for that and be like, bring it on. I want to take on this new challenge and be excited to the level that you all are at kickoff and when you start getting onto things. Taking on those crazy challenges that we don't even know exist yet are going to be much more, going to be much easier for students to do, and more people are going to be up for going after those challenges. So I think that what you guys are doing in that space is extremely important, and FIRST specifically is very well positioned to do that. The other thing I share is the story of when I first got introduced to FLL. And I met this 10-year-old girl in FLL, and she came up to me with her robot, and she was like, "This is my robot, and its name is Tobor, because that's robot spelled backwards." And I just thought it was like the cutest name and everything. I was like, I don't know what this girl is selling or doing, whatever, but I'm in. I'm listening. You've got my attention. And then she goes, and this is its ultrasonic sensor. And the ultrasonic sensor acts like a dolphin. It sends out a signal, and it listens back, and that's how my robot named Tobor navigates the playing field. And I was just like, little 10-year-old girl, did you just say ultrasonic sensor? Like, I was just mind blown that one, she knew what that was, two, that she had used one. I was in Rockwell's sales training program at that time. I was 22 years old, and I was supposed to be selling the sensors that Rockwell makes, the ultrasonic sensors, different types of inductive and proximity sensors that they make. I had never used one before. This little 10-year-old girl has one on her robot in front of me and has actually used it. So just showing that power of like how transformative this is and how more well-prepared students can be. And we don't have to wait until high school and college and spend all this extra money trying to get kids excited about STEM when we can just make investments early on to keep them engaged and excited. And that's going to be much more fruitful than everything that's happening on at the older ages. Not that that's not important, but it's going to be a better return on investment the younger we start.
Yeah, I know, definitely. I know with us, at least, the main way that we try and do that is through our virtual summer camp that we just had last week, which is Z.I.P Camp. With that, we're able to teach kids CAD, Python programming, and, how to solve those real world problems using innovative solutions, right? So with that, even if they don't want to go into FLL or FIRST, we're already building up a foundation or a base where we're able to give these students a chance to explore new levels, as you were saying, right? Having a 10-year-old that already knows what an ultrasonic sensor is really crazy, right? Like, I know for me at least, I didn't know that at the time, right? So just seeing how much we've, grown from them is really important.
I didn't learn about CAD until I was maybe 19 years old, right, in college. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know what it was until I had to take that course as a mechanical engineer. So the fact that you've got younger kids already getting involved is huge. And even if they decide to go on and do something else, just having that STEM literacy and awareness is going to make them better at whatever job they do. It's just going to make them a better problem solver at whatever career they choose. And they're going to be able to leverage technology in spaces that maybe other people don't feel as comfortable leveraging technology. So they're going to be able to kind of innovate within their own space, even if it's not, what we might think of as a traditional engineering degree or job career.
Yeah, like I would say definitely that is really important. And my question for you would be, at least, is like, how do you think we should do that on a, as I think Anoop was saying, on like a state or a national level, right? Because we can do so much at a local level, but at some point we need to start reaching further and further.
Yeah. So the cool thing about your generation is that you have more reach than Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali as well, but Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, any of these people that you think of, Gandhi, any of these people that you think of that had like this incredible reach and kind of game changing, mindset changing impact, they could not reach nearly as many people as you have the opportunity to reach with the technology we have today, whether that's social media, whether it's streaming opportunities like this, larger events and easier opportunities to travel and go to these places than they had in the past. So it's like the world is your oyster in that sense. Now it's just making sure that we're finding the creative enough ways to gather the excitement and attention around the things that we think are really important for the future. So one example that I've seen before that was a company that was trying to say they hired all these like super incredible and probably very expensive athletes to do this thing about how, we don't, the world doesn't need any more LeBron Jameses. The world doesn't need any more Serena Williamses. The world doesn't need any more Drew Breeses. What the world needs is more computer scientists. And that sounds on the surface like a great idea. But if you're taking a kid that's never heard about computer science, has no idea what Python is and thinks it's an animal, right? And you're telling them that their hero, their sports hero, is like, no, don't be like that. Let's just crush your dreams and you should do this other thing that you've never heard of. There's no chance that you're going to be able to connect with that student, right? So I think the most important part is to find the STEM behind things that are already passionate about. So if you're talking to someone from a particular community that happens to love basketball, let's talk about the STEM behind basketball, right? Let's talk about analytics. Let's talk about kind of projectile motion and how someone can shoot a half-court shot and what's required to do that. Like things that can help connect to what they already love and shows them the science behind it. I do it a lot with American Ninja Warrior because I competed on the show. And so I like to use examples of how I can use physics and kind of like the science of how I position my body or how obstacles are designed to make myself a better ninja warrior without even having to do an extra pull-up or an extra, training session. Obviously, I still need to train to have the strength, but I can improve myself by just understanding how the obstacle is designed or how I can leverage my body and momentum or potential energy, whatever the concept may be in that space. So the more ways we can do that, you're going to connect kids to the thing that they like. And that's where you go deep. Like you guys might have noticed on your teams, as you kind of figured out which role you like, that's where you really go hard and like really understand all the, like let's say it's coding, right? Then you go really hard into learning coding and programming. Or if it's mechanical design, that's where you really go deep into the CAD. Each one of those on the surface until you find something that you can connect a passion to, it might be cool. But once you connect the passion to it, it's like, yeah, this is what I love, and I'm going to become like an expert in this because I want to use it to do something awesome with my team. So these kids might start doing that with the sport or the thing that they're passionate about. And then either way, regardless of whether they go down the path or not, they'll be more aware and more connected to science. So we need to do that with adults, with leaders, helping them see the everyday, kind of that answer to the question, why would I ever need to use this again? In math class or in science, when you might ask a teacher that. Answering that question for people that are making decisions is going to help them see why we should fund these programs.
So I know like you've been doing this whole like thing of like spreading STEM to kids, getting them excited, and even like coming up with like your own box, like make sure kids have the tools and like the accessibility to like follow with you along. And as a team, we've just kind of started our own way of like trying to like include that same idea into our community. So I just wanted to ask you like, personally, like, how do you have like any tips for us, or maybe like ways that we can like better like affect like our influence on our community and like help with that way of like what is science, what is STEM, what is first, since you've been doing it a lot longer, or even ways that maybe like we can implement some of like your own boxes when we go out to different schools around our community and after school programs to give kids like their own like accessibilities and tools to do those fun science projects at home.
Absolutely. So one of the things I think you got to do, especially because you're such a successful team and you got an award at championship this year, that's like awesome. You want to make sure that the kids still feel like you guys are normal kids too, right? Even though you have all these incredible talents, you want to make sure that they feel like, yeah, I could be that person soon, right? So even when I'm doing my experiments, sometimes I don't mess up on purpose, but when I have a mistake, like I'm totally about sharing that because I don't want anyone to think that I'm just this super genius that science comes to really easily and he knows all these magic science tricks and that it just like was natural. It definitely wasn't that. It comes from experimenting. It comes from exploring, from making mistakes and getting better and improving. And that's how it started, even just with my outreach. My first presentations were probably terrible. They probably didn't inspire anybody. I remember my first time I was in college and I was talking to high school students and I basically just read my resume and told them about like what I was doing. And it was probably extremely dry because it's just this piece of paper on the screen. And maybe some of my stories were interesting, but overall my presentation didn't have any cool experiments. It didn't have any visuals aside from my resume. But like that's what I started learning. I was like, okay, they're not really connecting with this. Maybe I can bring a video next time. And maybe that will help spark some discussion. And then one time I thought I was going to talk to high school students. And on the way there, I found out I was actually talking to elementary and middle school students. And I'm like, oh no, like this is not going to be appropriate. They're going to be so bored. And at that time, The Dark Knight, one of the Batman movies, had come out. And it clicked for me. I was like, Batman wasn't born with superpowers. Batman uses technology and science and engineering to solve his problem, which is crime in Gotham City. And I was like, well, that's what engineers really do. We just solve different types of problems. And there's examples across cartoons and movies and superheroes and all over the place. I was like, that's what I need to share with these kids. Not what I'm studying in school, but what's relevant to what they're doing right now. And I started finding, okay, the Batman example was great, but this other example, no, they didn't think it was funny. And it just kept kind of moving and testing. And I'm always trying to get constructive criticism. It feels good for someone to say your presentation was great, but I always want to ask, like, I want to push a little bit further and say, what do you think I could have done better? Or which was your most favorite and which was your least favorite? And then I try to either improve the least favorite or swap it out with a different experiment that's maybe closer to some of the ones that they've been giving me more of that good positive feedback on. So it's going to be a process. It's going to take time, but always, play with that trial and error. Test it out and adjust and improve and see what kids are doing. In terms of actually leveraging and engaging with my particular stuff, we just set it up on the website is called STEMfinity.com. So if you look up STEMfinity or if you search for It's Not Magic, It's Science Kit on Google, you should end up on their website. And we have the kits available for individual purchase or for like a class pack, which the class pack comes with 24 and you get like free shipping and kind of discount from that. So whether that's if you want an individual kit for a brother or sister, or if you're a parent listening for your children or grandchildren, you can get individual kits. Or if you're a teacher or a team like you all that want to do outreach and maybe use it as an activity during the outreach or as a prize for kids that maybe the teams that win whatever thing you're doing, or a prize for engagement and asking questions. I've seen people do that before too. You can go with like kind of like the class pack type thing. But if you don't have budget and you just want to get involved and do some of the stuff, just go to my TikTok or my YouTube channel. On my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Jay Flores, there's a playlist with all the It's Not Magic, It's Science experiments, and you can access that for free. Again, most of it is stuff you already have in your home, or if it's not something you have in your home, it's something that you can get for low cost on like Amazon or go to Walmart. Actually, the last experiment I did for Ninja Warrior, which is going to be televised on national TV, I got almost everything except for one item from the dollar store. So like that's how simple it is in terms of what you need. It's the presentation that makes it awesome. So if we can do a TV quality experiment with just dollar store items and one thing from Amazon, just head to my YouTube channel and you can find all kinds of stuff that you can do with any level of budget.
Yeah, I know that does sound like really amazing, using your kids as well as being able to have a very effective presentation to engage, any audience of any demographic is really important. I know for us, not just like having a Google Slides presentation, but just really during Zip Camp, Anoop, who led all the CAD things, he let kids interact and build a house or build a chess piece, right? So it's not just that he's giving a Google Slides presentation, but being able to show students and having them interact with Tinkercad allow them to get more interested throughout the week, and we got a lot of positive feedback from that, which was really helpful.
That's awesome. Do you guys have a favorite activity from your camp that you might be able to share with other teams? Like, is there something that's like the fan favorite?
Oh, it's CAD by far. Even we had in the camp we had a programming and CAD and core values and project section, and all the kids always on CAD because it really provides that immediate effect, right? They're able to build something that they can see the effects to, and it's kind of like a stimulating type experience. They can build something that they want to build. So definitely that if any other team wants to implement something like a CAD program, it's super simple. So
yeah, I think there's two big things you said there that I think go back to the previous question as well. Is one, you said kind of what they want to build, right? So they get to work on what they're excited about versus, someone might want to build a house, someone might want to build a chess piece, someone might want to design, some random abstract figure. And then the other thing is just, you don't always get that satisfaction when you're doing homework of I made this, or I made the robot do that. Like that light bulb exciting moment is not transferable in a worksheet or a test, right? So the more experiences like that you guys can give the students, that they're kind of empowered by their learning and the actions that they just were taught by you all, and visibly see it, whether that's on the screen with CAD or physically moving with the robot, I think that's a game changer for a lot of kids.
No, definitely. And speaking about that, being more engaging, besides your kids and what we were talking about with CAD and programming, do you have any other ideas as well? I know you also mentioned your YouTube channel, but
yeah. So another thing I try to do with my shows is I try to make everything bigger. So I try to make it more visually appealing. I have some experiments that you do at home that are smaller versions, right? So that it's affordable and so that anybody can do it. But then occasionally, and especially when I'm doing my shows, I try to supersize it. That just makes the wow factor a little bit kind of next level. And then I try to get as much audience involvement as possible. So for as many experiments that I can that are safe and are make sense for me to bring kids up on stage, I bring them up. And I recently did it at the Puerto Rico FLL Championship, at their National First Lego League Championship. We had a show. And the way that the stage was set up, during the day they had the competition tables right in front of the stage. And then the seats were behind that. So when it came time to do the presentation, there was this big gap in between the audience and the stage, because that's where all the game tables were and where all the judges were standing and the cameras were. So we kind of had this big gap. But once I started bringing volunteers up and kids were realizing that they could be part of the experiments, they ditched the seats and they all just ran up and sat on the floor in the front because they wanted a chance to be part of the experience. And they wanted to be the one that was picked to do the experiment. And so just having that engagement of you can be part of this, even if you didn't know how this works, you're still a piece of the process. And you can, once I teach you the science behind it, you can go home and do it yourself. So it shows them that from an early age, right away, or even before how everything works, you can be part of it, and you can be a scientist, right? Or you can be an engineer. So anytime you have an opportunity to get that kind of volunteer engagement, and that they're just not listening, but they're actually actively participating, the better, especially with the big cool stuff. Because sometimes people will do hands-on activities, but they wait until the end and then they let the kids do stuff afterwards. I try to keep them engaged the whole time. And it's, especially with my larger shows, it's impossible to get every single child on stage. But even just that kind of feeling that, ooh, I might get picked, increases the level of engagement.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've seen at our own outreach events how, like, when the kids are engaged themselves, whether you're letting them touch the robot or drive the robot, it definitely gets, like, their amusement, their excitement a lot more, like, riled up. So I just had, like, another question was, like, how can other people around the community just, like, pitch in and kind of, like, make science and STEM and FIRST, like, fun for themselves? Like, I know your YouTube channel is, like, a really big way for, for advertisement and kind of an easy access sort of way for, like, everybody to access to. Would you say, like, that's the biggest opportunity for other people around the community to, like, also maybe start, like, doing a YouTube channel? Like, will it bring them, like, a lot of views if they're not getting a lot? Because I know we do, like, Z.I.P Talks, like this, and we've seen, like, great feedback from that. But, like, any tips from you?
Yeah, a couple of things. So, yes, social media, YouTube, whichever platform you like. Obviously, some are more designed for kids than others, but whichever one of those is you're most comfortable with, go there. So, for example, some people are really comfortable on camera and they can do videos. And so, like, TikTok and Reels are, like, easy, fun. I'm going to do this. Other people are a little bit more camera shy, or, they need to do a lot of takes, and it takes time, and it gets a little frustrating. So then for them, maybe like Twitter or Threads or something that's a little bit more text-based could be your place to do it. Or maybe a podcast or something, like these type of conversations that you don't feel like it needs to be perfect and everything needs to look good, but you can have a conversation about it. So the first thing is just finding out which one of those platforms is best for you. For example, when the pandemic hit and I was trying to figure everything out, my first idea was actually to write a STEM book. And I am terrible at putting ideas down on paper. I can talk about anything for days. You can ask me a question, I'll have, a pretty well thought out answer relatively quick. But when it comes to putting it down to paper, for whatever reason, I just can't. I'm just not good at that. So that idea failed. And I was like, well, I could do something similar on video, and I'm comfortable just getting the camera out. Why don't I just do videos? And TikTok was exploding at that time. So it worked out perfectly for me. So just finding out what you're comfortable with and which platform suits you the best there. In terms of views, so I remember my first couple presentations, I was telling you about those that weren't as good. I only had a couple kids in my audience. So sometimes I get caught up on, views, and we compare ourselves to other people and how many views they have. But I'm like, this video, even though I didn't think was, 1,000 views was good compared to my other videos that might get way more than that, that's still 1,000 people. That would have been crazy if my first presentation as a high school student to kids was 1,000 kids. So sometimes we forget about how impactful just a few views can be. So yeah, anytime you can get it out there, and I just try to do things that I like and that I think are impactful. So it doesn't matter whether it gets a lot of views or not. I want to do it anyway, so I'm going to put it out there. And some of them blow up and others don't. But either way, at least I'm getting it out there and people can see that. The other big, really important thing is making sure you're trying to design or create your experiences with as much equity and inclusion in mind from the beginning, right? You want to be able to cast as wide of a net as possible. There's so many challenges that we face as a world, and not even just like the scary ones that might end the world and stuff, but also just like making it more fun, or like making life a little bit easier in certain tasks that shouldn't be so difficult for us to do. However it is that we need to change the world and solve problems, we need everybody on board. And so making sure that your language is inclusive, that your activities are relatively easy for people to get at a low cost, or if not, that there's a version that they could do at least, right? So some of my bigger experiments, it's going to be expensive. Like when I do a giant elephant toothpaste one with like my, it's in the box, but I have one of those huge Erlenmeyer flasks, like the really big ones, 500 milliliters. Sorry, not 500 milliliters. I'm blanking on volume right now, but anyways, the really big one. that's expensive, right? So not everyone can do that, but I can show them a little version that they do at home with the hydrogen peroxide that you can get at Walgreens and like much cheaper things. So making sure you're doing that with anything that you're designing, even if it's not easy for everyone to be able to do, that you find a low cost version for them to do later on. I think those are some of the key aspects of making sure that you're reaching as many. And then whenever you can get out in person, so they can see you, so they can see, like, I met an engineer, or I met someone that knows how to drive this robot, and then they taught me how to do it. And especially if they're from your community, or you went to the same middle school as them, that's like potentially life-changing for a lot of kids, especially in areas where they might not have as much access or might not have as many role models that look like them.
Yeah, I know at least like from where like a majority of our team came from, Sanford Middle School. They do have a robotics program. They are a STEM-oriented school, but the amount of opportunities they get aren't as as frequent. So when our team got the chance to like go to their magnet night or just have the chance to talk with their teams, it was really impactful. So I know like during our conversation, something that I was thinking about is if we could like use your kids or some of your videos for them, right? So like I know you were saying that you guys have a classroom kit and like a single kit, right? Like how practical would that be, like in terms of cost, and how often could those students use it?
Yeah. So the way I designed the kit is some of the items I wanted to make sure were in there were some of the ones that are harder to find, like the thing that you can't get automatically at like your dollar store or your Walmart, right? So there's a couple items in there. I can actually show you some of the stuff since I have it here. So for example, this cup is just kind of like a souvenir item with it that's branding, but it's also experiment. It changes color with temperature. So this is something that you're not going to easily find in any store. You might see some stuff like around, or maybe you had a spoon that changed color when you're younger and you're having cereal. But something like this is something that they can do as many times as they want, as long as they don't lose it, right? And there's other items like that. Like this is one of my favorites, and this was actually my first experiment in the series on TikTok. And it's called memory metal. So it changes shape with temperature. Once it reaches a certain transition temperature, it goes back to the shape in which it was formed. So the version in the kit was formed in just a straight wire. So if you fold it up like this, I wish I would have set up some hot water, but I could show you if I put it in hot water, it'll straighten out all by itself, almost instantly. It's a really cool visual experiment. And the one that I did on TikTok, I used a paperclip shaped one that was formed as a paperclip originally. So all of us at some point in our life have been bored and deformed a paperclip and then tried to put it back into its original shape. And it takes time, and it usually doesn't get back exactly how you had it. So when I just dunk it in really quick and instantly it comes out and it's like in the normal shape, kids and adults are like mind blown. And they think I swapped it out somehow fast, and I show them, no, this is like literally it's just the temperature. And it's science that's doing that. It's not just me swapping it out or tricking you somehow. So this, again, is something that it's a little bit harder to find, but as long as you don't lose it, you can do this experiment as many times as you want. When your cousins or friends come over, you can blow their mind. When grandparents come over, you can blow their mind. If you want to do a little science show at home, you can do it yourself too. There's a couple items like these two that are forever items. But then there's other things like vinegar or baking soda that in the kit, I give you enough to do it once, maybe twice, depending on how you do it. So you will run out, but it's super low cost for you to do it again. So if you really love the invisible firefighter experiment, you have the instructions now, you know the measurements, because we have these, the experiment cards, which have up top what you need, how to perform the magic. There's a QR code to my YouTube channel, so you can watch the video if you need more explanation or if you just want to make sure you do it right the first time. On the back, what we have is called the magic reveal, which is the science behind the trick. And this particular one, the invisible firefighter, teaches you about the combustion triangle. So it tells you what fire needs to burn. And then there's this space at the bottom, which is I call Bring the Magic to Life. So it's some basically design space for you to come up with your own ideas of how you would use this science, draw a diagram, or write something out. And so stuff like that, yeah, you're going to have to go get more vinegar and baking soda to keep doing it, but it's going to be a very low cost to you. So you can keep doing it and doing it without breaking the bank. So yeah, those are like, I mean, I have a couple other different items. Like this one is a fizzy rocket. So this allows you to do, on my show, in the live show, we have a big version of this, which is with a paint can instead of with this little guy. So that's another one of those that's super visual, loud, high up in the air. I launched the can really high. They can do that in a much safer and lower cost way with just water and Alka-Seltzer tablets. So you're going to run out of Alka-Seltzer tablets, but as long as you don't lose this, you can keep buying some of those and keep going. And there's a couple more items, but you've got all the kind of materials you need and everything you need to get started. The only thing I don't include is, for example, there's one that needs an egg. I can't ship you an egg, right? At least not in one piece. So, but again, the egg is not, well, recently eggs have been expensive, but in general, they're usually not that expensive. Or one of them requires an orange peel. So I give you the other things you need, but I'm not going to send you an orange peel. But basically, out of the box, you can start doing this. So if you're doing it as an outreach event, you can either do it. What I do with my shows is I have the big versions of the experiments. We do them up on stage. We have volunteers come up, and then they take the kit home. And then they can go and do it with their parents or their siblings or their friends. And my website, I have the QR code goes to the videos on my website, which then takes them to my YouTube channel. But they're also embedded on my website. So it gives me data on, are people actually opening the kits and doing it? And my last show I did was in Milwaukee on the last week of school. It was like the second last day of school. So you wouldn't think that kids are going to go home and do more science when they go home. But actually, right away, that same day, I got a traffic spike on my website, which is showing me that the kids are actually opening their kits that same day. School's almost over. Kids would normally not want to be doing any of this stuff anymore, and they're going and doing it after school. And then I kind of watched it. Obviously, over time, it went down a little because most of them had already done some of it. But every day for like a week or two after, kids were checking it out. So you could do it that way, or you could open it up and have them open it up, and you can kind of do them simultaneously depending on the size of the group you have. There's a wide variety of ways in which you can get them involved. But the one warning I'll give you is like, you have to be very organized in how you get them to start, because it's so cool that you just open it and there's all this cool stuff and you're like, ooh, what is this one going to be for? And what is this going to be for? So if you want to keep control, especially with the younger students, you might need to decide, okay, now you're going to open and grab this item and leave everything else in and stuff like that. It's a good problem to have, like when the kids are overly excited about science, but just a fair warning as you're getting them started.
Yeah, no, like, I think with what you were saying, it's like, just having that initial presentation, and from there you're able to instantly see the effects. It's just so important to have, just being able to continue that STEM development, right? So, like, I think from what I understand at least is that it's, like, important that the event that you have, it's important that the presenters and the presentation itself is really successful. So with us at least, we have always been following your Instagram and your socials, and we've always seen your excitement in these programs, and we try to bring that enthusiasm through all our outreach events, right, and trying to get those kids involved. So what do you think is like the biggest way that our team can do that, so that we can have like a larger audience and kids get more engaged into this program?
Yeah. So one of the things I use to showcase how powerful my brand is and my impact is I show the facial expressions, the reactions of kids in the audience. I can show you my experiments and I can show you that they're cool, right? But when you see how mind blown some of the kids are, and like we had one where I did the last experiment and the kids were just dancing. Some of them were running around. Like it was just these really cool, natural, fun reactions. And I'll tell my sponsors or the people that I'm working with, like, how many times have you seen this in a traditional science or math setting, right? Like, how have you seen kids like dancing for joy and like losing their minds, in a normal worksheet or a normal homework or a normal classroom? Some teachers are really good. I don't want to take anything against teachers, but like, it's not as common to have this level of engagement and excitement. So when you're talking to people and trying to get larger crowds, just show kind of how you have impacted that in the past, but through the eyes of the kids that you've reached, not just like your numbers and, those are valuable too, right? But I think the true facial expressions are something that set me apart from most other people doing stuff in this space. The other thing is just each of you, like whoever's presenting, like really dive deep into your individual passions, because that's what's going to shine the brightest, and people are naturally going to see how passionate you are about it, and that's contagious, right? If you're forced to do a project on a topic that you don't really care about, right? Even if you do a good job, even if you get an A, you're not going to have that contagious enthusiasm. But if you're the one presenting on the topic that you love, like I can tell Anoop loves cat, right? I can tell that from the way you described it, from the way you described the reactions of the students, like that's your thing. So the more each of you can dive into your individual things and showcase that, hey, one of you is going to love CAD like I do, or maybe someone else is going to love the mechanical design, or some of you are going to like programming, but like here's who's really passionate about that. And make sure you go talk to them, ask them questions. You're going to get like that much more engaged response and reaction. So like everyone should be able to kind of shine in their space from that perspective. And then when you can then translate that to a sponsor, or to, let's say, like, I don't know, maybe you're trying to reach out to work with a museum and say, hey, we want to bring in a lot of kids because at our school we can only bring this many kids, but if we do it at the museum, we can bring in this many kids. Just showing that those reactions will help them be like, yeah, these kids have something special. Let's bring them in and give them access to our community or to our space.
Yeah, I know, like, with us, just being able to see the excitement and, like, the whoa factor on a kid's face is just really important, and with that, it just shows us, like, what impact we're instantly having, and, I know with the past 3 years of Z.I.P Camp, we always had one kid who was coming back, and every time he learned something new, and now he's actually on our team, and he actually helps Anoop with CAD, and he helped design our intake arm, and because of that, we were like, that's like one of our long-term things, is that we were able to see that we had an actual impact on one kid, right? Even if we went to an event and not everyone was as impressed, this one kid really was just shocked, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know that was like a really big thing for us. Sort of getting off like the STEM idea of it, in first, at least, how do you like normally reach out to younger crowds such as FLO Junior now during, like, I don't know if you do anything during the off season, or like previous to that, like how do you get them more involved besides just like going and talking to them?
Yeah, so with them, it's all about starting with curiosity and creativity. So I think a lot of people take something like an FLL and FLL Junior, and they still focus on like the STEM and the skills and the kind of like the thing that a corporation might want to hear, right? But the kid wants to hear like, I get to explore, I get to play, I get to like build things and make them do things. So, and also depending on their age, they may or may not have certain stereotypes about whether they're a math or science person or not, which is a very unfortunate thing. Like when people struggle to tie their shoes as kids, we don't say like, oh no, like you're not a shoe tying person. Like here's your Velcro shoes for life, right? Like we help them get through learning how to tie their shoes. And that's how math and science should be too. Yes, it's challenging, but just because it's challenging doesn't mean you're bad at it. And so we're going to help you get through this, and we're going to find the fun ways to make this work. And so some of those kids might have these kind of thoughts about whether they like it or not already before you even get to them. So if you're talking about, oh, like this is going to help you be really good at math or science, or oh, you need to be really good at math or science to do these things, you're going to kind of turn them away before you even get to the really cool stuff. And even if they still think it's cool, they might not connect that identity to it, and they might still think, yeah, that was cool, but that's for those people that are like really smart and really know these things. But if instead you start with creativity or curiosity, anybody can be curious, anybody can be creative. There's no like test or failed grade that they've had before on those things. They can connect and say, yeah, I'm pretty curious, or I'm pretty creative. I've come up with interesting ideas before. And then you pair that with then now they're gaining these skills that are those STEM skills we talked about. And then that's more of like the added benefit but they're thinking like, oh, I get to play, I get to explore, I get to be on a team and do cool things. And while at the same time, kind of by default, I'm also learning programming. I'm learning about sensors. I'm learning how to make a motor spin and when you're 6 years old, which is pretty awesome. All these things. So just start with more of those things that are more inclusive, that are more fun, and then allow them to gradually realize that you tricked them into learning some really important things.
So I kind of like more of like an off-topic question, but like I know you said before how you were actually on American Ninja Warrior, and we just want to ask like how'd you like get your start on that? Like what like appealed you to like want to go on American Ninja Warrior? Because like I know it's like when I was younger, I used to like watch like all the YouTube videos of like people passing or like getting like thrown into the water, and like where did you get your start on that?
Yeah. So I started originally with obstacle course racing, like the longer mud runs that are like long distance running and they have some obstacles. So it's not as hard as Ninja Warrior in terms of the difficulty of the obstacles themselves, but you have to run a lot. So it makes it more challenging from that space. So I got started kind of with an easier version, right? And then eventually the sport started getting more and more popular. And the show came down to Florida, to Miami. And I was living in Tampa, Florida at the time. And my brother, who was in more of the Miami area, told me that they were filming and that people could try to walk on. And I was like, yeah, like I'll drive after work. And I drove down from Tampa to Miami and I tried. I got there too late, so I wasn't able. I mean, I was there in time, but not in time to be early enough in the walk-on line to be able to compete. So the next year I came again and I tried to sleep over one night in the park. And that still wasn't enough because it got even more popular and people started catching on. So I failed again. I didn't get to do it. Then I found out you can apply. And so I sent in a video, but I did it last minute and it was terrible. I didn't get picked. I tried other different versions. Eventually they had a lottery system where you like show up and everyone kind of puts a ticket in and you could be a walk-on if you win that. I lost the lottery multiple times. Like I tried, when I finally got the call, it was my 10th attempt of some variety, whether that was walk-ons, applications, lotteries. It was after 10 seasons that I finally got it. And in a weird way, I'm kind of happy that it happened that way because one, I was way more prepared. Like when I first went, I wasn't strong enough to be able to complete a course. But after all those years of kind of getting the failure of the application, but I was improving and growing as an athlete. But then also, in the last 2 seasons, so I did season 14, and I'm going to be on, not the season that's airing right now, I'm going to be on the season that comes out in 2024, because they filmed 2 seasons at once this year because of the Olympics coming up next summer. So I got to showcase It's Not Magic, It's Science. I got to do experiments on stage. I got to do all the stuff that I didn't have, that didn't exist back then, that now I get this incredible opportunity and platform, not only to inspire people, but also to build my brand and my business. So I wouldn't have been ready for that scenario back then. But in general, like in terms of why, one, I just love challenges and obstacles. Like I use my engineering mind when I'm taking on courses, which I think makes me a better ninja and is also just satisfying and fun to me. But also the show is a huge platform. And if I can get kids to celebrate science and sports together, like we were mentioning earlier, like if we can take a society that already loves the show and celebrates it and show them that, hey, my experiment at the beginning of the course is just as cool, if not as cool as what you came to watch this show, and reaching kids that weren't looking for science but saw this, that's huge, right? And we're reaching millions and millions of people. The biggest kind of reward, though, has been last season, and you can find it on my YouTube channel. You can find my run from last year on one of my shorts. It was my semifinals run. My qualifying run didn't get aired, unfortunately, because we took FRC robots, and they use a similar radio frequency to the cameras that they filmed the show with. So we actually turned off a camera in the middle of my run. So that was a little bit of a disaster. I was really bummed because the FRC teams did awesome. We did pull-ups with the robot because it was the season that they were climbing up onto the rungs. We had an all-girls team along my sideline, and the robot was reacting to every time I completed an obstacle. I would do spins and stuff. And I made it to the obstacle right before the warped wall. So it would have been a really cool show. But anyways, they did show my semifinals run where I did an It's Not Magic, It's Science experiment. And right after I completed it, they panned to this kid in the audience. And it was another one of those mind-blown reactions. And it was a little kid. It happened to be a young Hispanic boy. And I don't know if they did this on purpose or if it was an accident. But when I watched that, I was like, that's me. You know, like, that's, how do I say that? That kid got to see the scientists that looked like them that I didn't get to see when I was a kid, right? So I got to be the person, the role model that I wish I would have been able to see when I was a kid. And I was doing it in shorts and a t-shirt and about to do an obstacle course. So I was showing this kid, you could do this too. Anybody could do this. And so that was like the most rewarding part of it. When I saw that moment on TV, I'm like, wow, not only did this look cool, we did a science experiment on TV and then conquered some obstacles. I got to see that live instant reaction that I hope, you know, there was millions of that across, you know, the world of people watching that too. I got to see the live version. But hopefully that was the reaction people were having at home too.
Your story is super cool. And I think you touched on this in all the previous conversations we had. But just to wrap up, one final question. What's your favorite part of STEM and robotics?
That is a really hard question. But a really good one at the same time. Well, first, thanks for the compliment. And I think it's just like, I've just chased all these different things that I'm passionate about. And sometimes they don't feel like they're connected, right? Like an engineering degree and American Ninja Warrior, but I find the way to combine all my passions. And I try to say no to as many things that are not engaged in those things that I love, right? Because those are just distractions and waste of time. So it seems like I'm doing all these things, but it's really, I'm just hyper-focused on a couple that I really love. And I get to kind of have a bigger impact in each of those because I'm very focused. When it comes to STEM and robotics, like what my favorite part of that is, so I have like a fun and a deep answer. Okay, so let's start with fun, and the fun is just like how crazy kids can go at like a world championship, for example, with first, or when I have a really cool experiment and just the reactions. Like the amount of excitement and joy that we can spark with STEM, that is something that's not just entertaining, but it also has that huge educational value, is just the most rewarding thing. Because yeah, it's easy. I mean, it's not easy, but yeah, it's great that we can entertain people with movies or sports or whatever, but it's not always as game changing or life changing. Like it might inspire someone to go to the NBA or to do something incredible in movies, but with what we're doing in STEM, we could inspire someone that cures cancer or creates a car that doesn't pollute. And so it's that next level of excitement for something that I feel is super important. And I guess that goes then into my deeper answer. Like my favorite thing is that everything I'm doing, I'm hoping that one day a kid is going to come up to me when they're like 30 or 40 and I'm really old, and they're like, you know, because of your experiment, because of the invisible firefighter, right? Like I created something that ended forest fires in California, right? Or because of whatever show that you did, like I studied this and now I'm like curing cancer. So that I think is going to be the most rewarding thing in the long term. And I keep that in mind all the time, actually. Like when things are hard or when I'm a little bit frustrated or it's not the most fun day for me, I think about like, okay, yeah, this part of it sucks right now, but what I'm doing is potentially going to inspire someone that does absolutely incredible things. And even if they don't, even if they just become a normal engineer and do some cool stuff, like they're going to do cool stuff, they're going to be rewarded for it, both in like satisfaction, but also with a good career and a good, you know, something to build their family with and improve their future. So no matter what level of impact that student ends up happening, at least they're now on a better track to be able to sustain themselves and their families and have some level of impact on others.
Well, thank you for all the tips. We got 2 last minute questions I just want to ask. Actually, Mola can ask after. But do you have any opportunities where other first ambassadors or alumni or even first teams can collaborate with you or volunteer for your events or demonstrations in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, like I mentioned earlier, just using the YouTube videos. In addition to this Not Magic, It's Science YouTube videos, one other thing that we haven't talked about that is really impactful from my end and one of my favorite projects is I'm a mystery science guide for Discovery Education's mystery science program. And there we take questions that K to fifth graders ask, and we answer them in a way that's like designed for them. Because like Google's not designed to answer a second grader's question, right? It's going to give you kind of like a more adult level question. But kids ask everything from like, how are Lego bricks invented? How is ice cream made? How do you make imaginary characters look real in the movies? Can any animal outrun a cheetah? Like I've done all kinds of awesome, creative, different things. One of my other favorites is why don't we fall out of roller coasters when they go upside down? All these really curiosity sparking questions that kids think about, but parents might not always have the answer for, or Google has an answer, but it's not age appropriate for young ones. Grab those. It's all free on YouTube. Share them at your events. Share them with your family members or anyone that you're trying to inspire around science. Just really helping spread the awareness of the content that I'm sharing is really helpful. And same with the It's Not Magic, It's Science experiments or the kits. So that's one big thing. And then I try to announce on social media as early as I can when I'm going to a certain community. So if you know that I'm coming towards your town, or if you can help introduce me to a sponsor in your community that might want to fund the live show, that's huge, because basically the way I choose where I'm going is if I can find a presenting sponsor first. So that's, that was Ford in Detroit. That was Rockwell Automation in Milwaukee. That helps fund all the kits for the kids, all of my travel and expenses for the experiments, all that kind of stuff. And then I can, reach, we've done so far our largest group. We've done 500 kids, but not every kid got a kit at that show. Later this year, we are doing a show of 600 kids where every single kid will get a kit. So pretty soon this year, we're going to have a pretty epic, large one. I can't wait to actually announce that one. So whether I'm going into your community and you just want to volunteer and show up, it depends because of whether I'm going into school or a museum. Like there's certain rules. But in general, I can usually find a couple roles for some volunteers and some help, or just to spread the word in that community. And or if you know a sponsor that might want to do some work and we can connect and I can do something at the team and then also wherever we end up doing the live event. That's probably a couple of the best ways. So spreading it on social media. If I'm coming to your town, just letting me know that your team is there and what you might be able to do in terms of volunteering, we can talk about. Or, hey, we've got some sponsors in our community that might want to bring in your show and just help me with the introduction and I'll take care of the rest. I think those are a few of the best ways.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds really great. Like if you're ever in the Orlando area or just like around there, just don't hesitate to contact us. We would definitely want to help. But yeah, so thank you so much for your time today. I know this is a bit of a short notice, but we really appreciate having you on today, right? So, but yeah, thank you once again for joining us on the first episode of Z.I.P Talks this season.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for all you're doing in the community, and I hope to see you guys again soon, whether that's in Orlando or at Championship or some other event.